Shalom, Israel, Most High in Christ bless. All praises to the Most High that we made it to another Sabbath day. And of course, we do all things in the name of His Son, His Word, Jesus the Christ. Welcome to the Sabbath class. I'm going to take it off of this for a second. And we're going to put it on this for the time being. And the reason why I put it on this, and I do still want to stall a little bit like I do every week as far as the Sabbath class are concerned. I want to give a little bit of time, not much, because we got a lot to cover, all right? And no, it's not about Israel and Gaza again, though rest assured that Israel's still bombing the hell out of Gaza, right? That hasn't changed, all right? So if you need an update on that, that's the update. Israel's still bombing the hell out of Gaza, all right? That ain't changed at all right? So what we will be talking about actually came from Umar Johnson, of all places, Dr. Umar Johnson. He is not in the truth as far as like he doesn't proclaim to be an Israelite, he does not keep the laws of God, but he does say some interesting things from time to time. And I've seen this, I don't know if it was this past week, maybe the week before last, but I've seen him saying this that I'm about to play for you now. And listen to what he says real quick, alright? I wonder if this is actually going to play it and like give audio. Let's see.
Talking about you unapologetically African, but you're afraid to say that you're worried about your people's problems. Ain't nobody helping us. You got 27 million Africans in the Congo, displaced, environmental issues, hunger, poor health care. You got 1 million Ethiopians who've been murdered. You got Sudanese who have died. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Sudanese. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Ethiopians. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Congolese. But you want me to cry tears for the Arabs? Listen, I hope the Arabs in the West Bank in Gaza, I hope they get all they get. I hope they are protected. I hope nobody dies. I hope those babies' lives are safe. I hope the women are cared for. I hope that there's no bloodshed, no violence. But if you think I'm going to take time out of struggling for African people, if you think I'm going to stop my agenda to liberate my people to go cry for people who don't cry for me, if you think...
I know he got cut off at the end there, but he made a lot of good points, saying, that they want black Americans to pick a side between the Israeli-Gaza conflict when that ain't got nothing to do with us over here. That ain't got nothing to do with the people that's over here in the U.S., all right? The only thing that has to do with that is if you are giving all the money to the state of Israel. Like, that's the only reason it should concern you at all. Right, that's just like these big lobbyist interest groups, right? So, he said nobody spoke on the Sudan conflict. I went back and I checked the dates. I actually put up a video on October 3rd. That was 4 days before the Hamas attack on the state of Israel, right? But at that music festival, right? This was 4 days before that music festival. I actually put up a video of a live stream that we did the previous Sabbath. I put it up on YouTube called Ishmael's Ethnic Cleansing in Sudan. So yeah, we have been covering these topics that people don't want to talk about, all right? But I didn't know much about the Congo conflict. So I had to read up on this, had to learn some things on this, and we're going to get into it. I don't know much about the Ethiopian. Maybe we'll get into that at some other point. But here on this Congo conflict, on this conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because the Congo and the DRC are two completely different things, all right? But I'll be back in one moment. I have to go check something real quick. We're going to see how we're doing as far as technical issues, if we have any. If that video was even playing, I couldn't tell you, but I'll check and see. We're going to see how we're doing as far as technical issues, if we have any. If that video was even... All right, it's kind of weird because okay, it seems like the audio did come through. All praise to the Most High. I wasn't sure if it was going to or not, but all praise to the Lord. It seems that it did. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into lesson for this week. And we'll start with these photos, I guess. I don't know if y'all can see these very well based on where my camera is. But actually, let's take a look. Can y'all see that? Well, now you can't, but you should be able to see most of them at least. Most of it. And look, as it says right here, a Congolese soldier leads a session to enroll new recruits into the army. All right. To go to the front against the M23 rebellion in Goma, right? So we'll get into the M23 and who that is, but look, it's like they're in a music video or something. It's like they're trying to make it cool. That's what the American military does, and that's obviously what this Congolese soldier is trying to do. He's trying to make it seem cool to join the military and to fight this cause, right? And here you see the people being displaced with the forced migration in the Congo, all right? It says Congolese internally displaced civilians carry their belongings as they flee from renewed tensions from Kanyaruchinya to Goma in the North Kivu province of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that was last year. All right, a lot of these photos were taken like last year, towards the end of last year. That's when things started flaring up in the Congo again. Not that it was ever safe, really. It's been going on. We're going to get into the background here in a minute about how it's been going on since like 96. All right. But anyway, that's the people that's being displaced. All right. And look what it says right here. It says a peacekeeper holds his weapon during a patrol around the new base set up in Rugari as the population watches the military in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Yeah, he looks like a peacekeeper, don't he? With the UN on the helmet and the gun in his hand and the people behind him afraid. Yeah, he looks a lot like a peacekeeper, don't he? Anyway, and here you see more. Okay, so these are the M23 rebels. All right. And there's a Congolese army major points out how they're destroying this village. All right, and here you have demonstrators carry a poster honoring the DRC armed forces during a protest in Goma, several thousand people demonstrated to denounce Rwandan aggression. Keep that in mind. That's what a lot of this is based on. A lot of this conflict is based on the Rwandan aggression, and it even stems from that Rwandan genocide that happened in the 90s. All right. This is Congolese writers participate during a demonstration to demand justice for the murder of civilians killed during a protest against the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Right. So some people in the Congo want the UN to be there, but a lot of them do not want the UN to be there because the UN shows up and causes more problems. All right. In East African Community, Regional Force, and Goma. All right. It says Congolese soldiers from the armed forces of the DRC rest in the forest after the army took control of an allied democratic forces, ADF, and that's Islamic forces. ADF is Islamic forces. Rebel camp near the town of Kimbao in the North Kivu province. All right, we'll get into some of these provinces as well because that's pretty important where these provinces are. We're not going to do this thesis. We're going to get straight into the background. All right. It says since '96, conflict in the Eastern DRC has led to approximately 6 million deaths. The first Congo War from '96 to '97 began in the wake of the '94 Rwandan genocide. Excuse me, I thought the Rwandan genocide was in '96. It was in '94. During which the ethnic Hutu extremists killed an estimated 1 million minority ethnic Tutsis, or also known as the Watusis, all right? And moderate Hutus in Rwanda, DRC's neighbor to the east. So when it says 1 million, that 1 million number is not only encompassing the Watusis, but also the Hutus, right? Even though it's an ethnic Hutu extremist, they're killing a lot of their own people, all right? And not just the Tutsis, right? That's a separate people. And I do want to point out this real quick. I want to jump to this article, and we won't read all of this article. I just want some bullet points in this one. It says Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in Eastern DRC have committed unlawful killings, rape, and other apparent war crimes since late 2022. So this article really just, Human Rights Watch sent people over there and to witness what's actually happening, all right? And it's some vile and wicked stuff. Let's just put it like that, all right? It says, the dire security situation has been compounded by martial law in the region and the collaboration of the Congolese army with various armed groups, mostly along ethnic lines. Now you may be thinking, well, they're all African. Why is it along ethnic lines? These are not all the same people in Africa. All right? We're going to get into that a little later once we get into the scriptures. All right? These areas in Africa are populated by Canaanites and Israelites, all right? So that's where a lot of the conflict comes from. As it says here, the conflict is mostly along ethnic lines, all right? The Hutu and the Watusi are warring with each other. And the Hutu even kill their own if they're not fighting the Watusi, all right? So, yeah, we'll come back to this group. We'll come back to this article. Let's go back to this. This is actually the Council on Foreign Relations. If you know anything about them, you know that they are wicked, but they record everything that all these countries are doing. All right? So I would say this source is a credible source of the information that's happening. All right? So it says that Rwandan genocide, when the Hutu extremists killed Hutus and Watusis, all right, during and following the genocide, nearly 2 million Hutu refugees crossed the Congolese border, mostly settling in refugee camps in North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. All right, so I'll bring up a map of these provinces real quick. So here's the provinces that's in the Congo. And I know it's over here on this side where you can't really see it. Let me see if I can flip this around a little bit. Yeah, I'll put it on this side for now. Let's get rid of this so you can actually see what's going on. So here are the provinces. The main provinces that we need to focus on as far as this story is concerned is the Ituri province, number 3 right here. The North Kivu province, as you see, number 15 right here. The South Kivu province, as you see, number 25. And the, what's the name of this 19? It's Tanganyika. I can never remember that. The Tanganyika province. And how they numbered these is beyond me. I don't know how they come up with this number system. But it's these 4 provinces, or states, that we're going to be reading about mostly. Right here on the eastern border of the Congo, or of the DRC, I should say. And here is a map that shows where those are is essentially, you see Rwanda right here, this tiny little country, and Burundi just south, and Uganda just to the north. This is mainly where these provinces lie, all right? And obviously, when you get down to Tanganyika, you're on that lake. But Rwanda and Burundi are right there next to the Kivu provinces, all right? So that's how these provinces play a role, all right? A small subset of those Rwandans who entered DRC were Hutu extremists who began organizing militias within the Congo, right? So these Hutus were essentially warring against the Watusis in Rwanda. And as I said earlier, these Hutus, even if you were their people, you were a Hutu. If you weren't against the Watusi, then you get it too. All right. So this led most. I ain't gonna say most of the Hutus because I don't know the population. This led to a couple million Hutus running into the Congo, and amongst those couple million, there were a few of those who were doing the persecution in the first place. All right. Who began organizing militias within the Congo. Pressure intensified as Tutsi militias organized against the Hutu groups as foreign powers began taking sides, right? So that's where all this stems from. It stems from the Watusi, also known as the Tutsi, versus the Hutu. That's what this goes into. And if you look into these people, they're both Bantu, right? So you would think they're the same, but not quite. And we'll get into that a little later. About how Israelites and Canaanites began to be viewed as the same. All right. Let's see. Yeah, right there. It says, following the Rwandan Patriotic Front's victory against the genocidal Rwandan government, the new Tutsi-led government began its involvement in DRC, then known as the Republic of Zaire. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I believe these Watusi are the Canaanites, and I believe these Hutu are Israelites. And the reason for that is because the Hutu can't seem to come together. And we'll read in the scripture how the scripture tells us that, we need to come together under God. That's the only way that we will ever come together as the Israelites. And until then, we're just going to be divided, right? It could be that, the Watusi and the Hutu are Israelites, but it doesn't seem that way. It seems like the Tutsi or Watusi are the Canaanites and the Hutu are the Israelites, all right? But it could be a mix, only God knows. It says Rwandan troops under the leadership of President Paul Kagame and Congo-based Tutsi militias with Rwandan backing launched an invasion of Zaire. Right, so Zaire was the old name for the DRC. Originally it was called the DRC, then they said let's change it to Zaire, and then they changed it back to the DRC. All right, which was ruled at the time by dictator Mobutu Sese Seko. Kigali justified both efforts by arguing that Hutu groups in the eastern DRC were still a threat to their Tutsi population and that the Mobutu regime was harboring Hutu extremists but fled across the border, right? So they're saying even though they're over there on that side, they're still a threat to us, we still need to wipe them out, right? It sounds just like the heathen trying to genocide the people, trying to genocide the Israelites. And you could even argue that it's justified because, they're coming off the back of a genocide as well. So, it's muddy waters. I'm not going to sit here and say one side is righteous and one side isn't. It's not that clear, all right? It's, just causing a lot of innocent people to be displaced and to lose their homes. And that's not great, obviously. But what was I going to look into? Oh, Kigali. Kigali is the capital of Rwanda. You see it right here. And what it says, because it also says Kinshasa, right? Kinshasa right over here. Kinshasa being the capital of the DRC and Kigali being the capital of Rwanda. So you'll see that mentioned in this article a lot. It'll say Kigali versus Kinshasa a lot. All right, so when it says Kigali, just know it's talking about Rwanda. When it says Kinshasa, it's talking about the DRC. All right. So Rwanda waged the first Congo War against Zaire with the help of other African states, most significantly Uganda, but also Angola and Burundi. Right. So these surrounding countries also said, "Yeah, we got to step in because this is too much." All right. Who had their own security concerns related to Mobutu's support of rebel groups across the continent, right? So this man was trying to stage coups all over because he thought he was American or something. The Rwandan coalition's invasion was coordinated with the help of Zaire's then opposition leader, Kabila. Thousands died. Some casualties were former Hutu militants and members of armed groups, but many were refugees and non-combatant Congolese in North and South Kivu and Eastern DRC, right? We just showed how those are the states that border Rwanda and Burundi. So, those are the ones that got hit the worst, I should say. Methods of warfare were brutal, especially those employed by Rwandan soldiers and the Tutsi groups, right? Fueled with the hatred, all right? The Kabila-Kagame coalition won the first Congo War in 1997 when Mobutu fled Kinshasa, right? So Rwanda won the first Congo War in 1997. Kabila was installed as president of Zaire and changed the country's name back to the DRC. All right. In 1998, the second Congo War broke out. This is the following year. Following the deterioration of relations between Kigali and Kinshasa, in an attempt to diminish the impression that Rwanda held undue influence over the Congolese government, Kabila denied claims that Rwanda had been responsible for winning the war and placing him in power. which is a lie. That's exactly what happened. Kabila also began removing ethnic Tutsis from his government and took measures to weaken Rwanda's military presence in eastern DRC. By the late 90s, it was becoming clear to the world that targeted campaigns against Hutu populations during the First Congo War, mostly led by Kagame's army, amounted to war crimes, a growing international consensus that reflected poorly on the fledgling Kabila regime. All right, so as you can see here, the Hutu is getting it the worst because the Hutu is getting it from their own people that are extremists, but the Watusi are all on the same page. The Watusi are never attacking their own people, but it's the Hutu that are. All right? That's why the Hutu is getting it the worst. The Hutu are the ones trapped in the middle of all this, and you know, they're not getting the help of their, you know, extremists who are among their people the way the Watusi are, right? In a reversal of alliances, Kabila ordered all foreign troops out of the Congo and allowed Hutu armed groups to organize at the border once again, right? Because he saw, like, okay, y'all can't just keep killing our people. That's not gonna fly. Rwanda responded by invading in '98. Kigali's stated aim was to create its own in the DRC Rwanda borderlands controlled by its own troops in order to create more distance from Hutu groups in the eastern DRC. Congolese forces supported by Angola, which also reversed alliances following the ascent of Laurent Kabila. You have Namibia and Zimbabwe fought the Rwandan, Ugandan, and Burundi militaries, as well as various rebel groups supported by Kigali and Kampala. All right, Kampala being the capital of Uganda. All right. So here in this second Congo War, you have a little bit more of a fair fight, just because you had more countries on the Congo side, but you still had the same, you know, main groups over on the Rwandan side with the Rwandan, Ugandan, and Burundi alliance, right? Amidst the chaos of war, Laurent Kabila was assassinated in a 2001 coup attempt planned by his own aides and guards. And see, that's the type of stuff that you read about in the Kings, where it happened all the time in the Northern Kingdom, where you would have coups planned to overthrow that current king, and at this point it's president. But you saw it in Judah as well. So we might touch on that once we get into the scriptures on it, just to show you a coup attempt in the Bible. But that sounds a lot like Israel, all right? Israelites, not the state of Israel, all right? Those involved were imprisoned, and Kabila's son, Joseph Kabila, took power. The Second Congo War was formally brought to a close under the junior Kabila in 2002. And while estimates vary greatly, the death toll of the Second Congo War and the associated humanitarian disaster may have reached over 3 million people by 2004, all right? So never being able to fully recover from the first war, really. It says between 02 and 03, Rwanda, Uganda, and DRC began implementing a set of peace agreements that authorized a transitional government in Kinshasa led by Joseph Kabila. Despite these agreements, the establishment of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, and the presence of a renewed UN peacekeeping force, unrest and clashes persisted in the eastern DRC. Yeah, so that UN peacekeeping probably did not help as much as they would like you to believe. Joseph Kabila was formally inaugurated following a long-awaited popular election in 2006. One of the most prominent rebel groups to emerge in the early 2000s was known as the March 23 movement, M23. So we're getting to the M23, and the M23 are, well, it's about to say it right here, made up primarily of ethnic Tutsis, you know, the Watusis. So they're mainly Rwandan, all right? Between 2012 and 2013, M23 became an undeniable force in the eastern DRC. And Kinshasa accused Kigali of backing the group, which they have been. Like I said about the Watusis, the Rwandans are all on one accord, all right? And they're backing the Watusis, and they are backing the M23. That's basically, you know, a mercenary group, if you want to call it that, But I guess it's more similar to when the U.S. backed Al-Qaeda, right? So, or ISIS, or whoever they back in the Middle East, right? Or the same with the way that Iran backs Hezbollah and Hamas. You know, it's the same thing. All right. I just read that. In 2013, the UN Security Council authorized the Rare Offense Brigade under the mandate of the UN Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC, which is MONUSCO. So the MONUSCO is the UN sending soldiers in there. All right, the UN doesn't usually do that, but this is what they did in this case. All right, to support the Congolese army in its fight against M23. MONUSCO was effective in its support of the Congolese army, and M23 called off its initial campaign in 2013. Evidence of Rwanda's support for M23 caused lasting damage to the Kigali-Kinshasa relationship. Right? They can't come together if you are backing fighters against me. Like, how can we come together if you are supporting fighters against me? That don't make no sense, right? Let's keep going. It says other flashpoints have arisen over the past 2 decades in states on the Congo-Rwandan border, such as Ituri, most often involving ethnic and militant groups with contestations going back to the Congo wars, right? That's where it all started, was that, Rwandan genocide, and then the first Congo war, which was a backlash from that, right? It says the 21st century brought one more complication to the peace efforts in the DRC. The proliferation of mining operations. I don't know if you noticed or if you've seen this, but there was a clip that was going viral, that was going around the internet, of children and entire families working with their hands, like not even many tools, down in cobalt mines to dig for this cobalt and this lithium, all right? It says, mining operation. DRC is home to some of the world's largest reserves of metals and rare earth minerals used to produce advanced electronics. As the world has become more reliant than ever on cobalt, copper, zinc, and other minerals, local and external groups have become more incentivized to get involved in the Congolese conflict. So now that there's money involved, everybody wants their hand in the pie. All right, Felix, and I'm going to butcher this last name. I have no idea what this says. I think it's Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi, I don't know what that is. Tshisekedi was declared the winner of the DRC's December 2018 elections and was inaugurated in 2019, in January. The transfer of power from President Kabila marked the first peaceful transfer of power in the DRC's history. However, the 2018 election results have since been questioned, and some polling data indicates that a different candidate, Martin Fayulu, may have won. Upon his inauguration, Tshisekedi inherited a number of crises, including outbreaks of Ebola and ongoing violence in the eastern DRC. Look, it's nothing new in the world for elections to be contested. Obviously, we saw that here in America. The past two elections, the past two presidential elections, we saw that. And it's no secret that countries just pick whoever they want to be their successor. And it seems like Kabila picked Tshisekedi because maybe he shared some political values or whatever. Shared his stance on whatever issues that they've got going on, other than, well, it's probably all about military ties, honestly. The abundance of natural resources, especially precious minerals found in Congolese soil, has globalized the conflict in eastern DRC. While U.S. companies once owned vast cobalt mines in the Congo, most were sold to Chinese companies during the Barack Obama and Donald Trump administrations. Now, if you recall, Donald Trump was running off the fact that, China's getting too powerful, we need to stop China, Barack has let China go too far. Donald Trump, he got in office, he did the same thing as Barack when it comes to Chinese expansion into Africa and into other areas of the world, into other avenues of business. He just said those things so dumb rednecks would support him. All right, I'm telling you straight. All right, all these presidents they put in there do the same thing. It doesn't matter what they say. They're all following the same agenda. Whether it be Obama, whether it be Trump, whether it be Biden, they're all following the same course. All right. The same way that Trump said he was going to build a wall, and he didn't get finished with it, but Biden is continuing the work. Because they all are following the same agenda. They're all following the same path. They may act like they disagree. They don't. They're all doing the same policies. All right? It says Chinese companies connected to Beijing now control the majority of foreign-owned cobalt, uranium, and copper mines in the DRC. And the Congolese army has been repeatedly deployed to mining sites in eastern DRC to protect Chinese assets. Right? So you probably, I'm kind of inferring this at this point, but you probably had a situation where profits were down 1 month, and that's because there was conflicts at the mining site. And so the Chinese called up the Congolese and like, hey, where's our money? And then the Congo was like, well, there's problems going on. Okay, well, send military over there. So it was probably something like that going on. All right. The Joe Biden administration has acknowledged that China's virtual monopoly in DRC's mining industry plays a significant role in boosting China's competitive advantage in the energy and technology arenas and is a hindrance to U.S. clean energy aspirations. See, Biden is not going to talk about the conflict going on in the Congo. He don't care about that. He said, well, China's kind of messing up our money by being over there. He ain't going to talk about the millions of people that's been displaced. He don't care about them. He cares about the money. All right. It says China is involved in Congo's internal conflict as well as its economy. The Congolese government is fighting M23 rebels with the help of Chinese drones and weaponry. You see that right there? So they got those weapons from China. They're relying on them drones to fight these M23 rebels. And Uganda has purchased Chinese arms to carry out military operations within DRC borders. So China is funding both sides. Uganda and the DRC do not like each other. All right? They're fighting against each other. China don't care. They just want to take the resources from the land. They don't care about the people that die. All right? It said the deals China negotiated with Congolese leadership, especially during the Joseph Kabila regime, have helped Chinese firms secure unprecedented access to metals that allow them to mass produce electronics and clean energy technologies. The Beijing-Kinshasa relationship came under international scrutiny leading up to President Kabila's resignation in 2019 when evidence emerged that Chinese capital intended for infrastructure investment as repayment for mining rights was being funneled to Joseph Kabila and his associates. You see that right there? So this devil, Kabila, was taking this money that the Chinese were giving him to take all the resources out of the land, and instead of giving that money back to the people, he said, I'm gonna give it to my people. I'm gonna give it to my friends. I'm gonna give it to my family. I'm gonna put it in my pockets. That's where it belongs. Man. I do think it's Israelites. That's a real Latin American type stuff right there. All right. China and DRC's complex, multi-layered economic and military relationship has resulted in limited access to the Congo's vital resources and profits for other countries and the Congolese people themselves. All right, so it's China stepping in has just complicated this whole issue. All right, he's given the weapons to the people so they can kill more of each other, and they're taking the resources from all the countries in the region, not just the Congo, but the Congo is where all that cobalt and stuff is. China's presence in the resource-rich eastern DRC is not without its risk, however. In September this year, Chinese nationals were among the casualties of a militant group's deadly robbery of a mining company convoy. Right? So there was like a Brinks truck that hit, right? And took all the valuables. All right? Additionally, a U.S. Congressional Human Rights Commission heard testimony in July of last year regarding the use of child labor and other illegal practices in Congolese mines. And that's what I was just making reference to in the videos. Allegedly, including those owned and operated by Chinese companies. Yeah, allegedly. While the U.S. does maintain a relationship with the DRC, the trade relationship is minimized by U.S. restrictions on imports from conflict-affected states and bans on importing conflict minerals, which are resources such as tin and gold mined for profit of armed groups in the Congo and neighboring countries, right? So they do that as far as they say, well, we're not going to bring in any conflict materials from the Congo right now, but they'll still have all their iPhones made by sweatshops in China. They'll still have all their sneakers made by little children in China and in Indonesia and places like that. So, the hypocrisy is very blatant when it comes to this conflict that's in the Congo and the U.S. and China's relationship with this situation. In 2022, renewed tensions mounted between the DRC and Rwanda, right? Because there was essentially the M23 movement got shut down, I think it was like 2013, 2014, by, what did it say up here about the Congo? Yeah. And MONUSCO, that's right. With the Congo and MONUSCO come together, that is the UN. The UN and the Congo come together to shut down the M23 the first time they rose up, alright? M23 rebels resurfaced after 5 years of inactivity and had gained control of large parts of the North Kivu province by July 2023. Kinshasa accused Kigali of funding and supporting M23's resurgence, an accusation supported by the African Union, the European Union, and the United States. So everybody knows. Everybody knows that Rwanda is funding this M23 group. Everybody knows. Whether it be the Africans, whether it be the Europeans, or whether it be the Americans. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what's happening here. All right. In return, Kigali accused Kinshasa of once again supporting the Hutu extremist militias, and yeah, that's probably happening as well, and increased its military presence inside the Congo. All right, yeah, I believe that as well. That the Hutus have been funded by the Kabilas initially, but probably Tshisekedi was that his name, the new president over there. Congo, Rwanda, Uganda. Rwanda and Uganda and militias with their support have financial stakes in Congolese mines, though they're not always legitimate. Yeah, why would they have legitimate claims to Congolese mines? It doesn't make any sense. In October, UN Special Envoy to the Great Lakes region, the Great Lakes of Africa that is, Zia Wong, I think, warned that tensions between the two countries could lead to an open military confrontation instead of these militias coming up. Instead of these militias fighting each other, the M23 and the Hutu extremists, it could lead to a full-blown war over there between, the same countries that were in the first two Congo wars. All right. Expressing his concerns about the military strengthening in both countries, the absence of direct high-level dialogue, and the persistence of hate speech. All right. So y'all know Israelites ain't no strangers to hate speech. Right, we see that a lot. Repeated attempts to reach a lasting ceasefire between M23 and the Congolese government have been unsuccessful, and violence continues to come in waves. Casualties remain on the rise as armed groups attack displacement camps, civilians in the DRC, and abroad, and self-defense groups. All right. So, this is driving the people that are in the East to. They can't stay there, right? It's similar to Gaza, except they have more room to move around. But even, I think it's about to say it down here, that they can't really move around as much because it's a lot of what they're trying to go through is jungle, right? Let's keep reading now. In May, the South African Development Community agreed to deploy troops to Eastern Congo to assist UN forces ahead of December 2023 elections. However, a month later, the UN announced a planned withdrawal of the largely unpopular, I think they meant MONUSCO right here, and they forgot the end, peacekeeping mission, a decision the United States called premature, right? So, of course, the U.S. is saying, y'all should have stayed there longer. Y'all should have had y'all military forces there longer. But the people there do not want the UN there. So what are the UN actually doing over there? Obviously, they say they're there to keep peace, but why are they there if the people don't want them there? What are they doing? What actions are they doing against the people that makes them not want them there any longer? That's the real question. Right? It says, the poor reputation of the UN mission has led to violent unrest and extrajudicial killings of anti-MONUSCO protesters by Congolese security forces in Goma. Right? So the Congolese government wants the UN there, but as we have seen, the Congolese government cannot always be trusted. for what's best for their people, right? As we saw with Joseph Kabila, he was lining his pockets with the money that was supposed to go to the people. So they can't always be trusted for what's best for the people, all right? In Goma, UN officials have acknowledged that the drawdown of MONUSCO and other forces poses the risk of a security vacuum amid a deteriorating security situation in Ituri and North Kivu, right? So they said, look, this could be a problem. we're leaving, and it's worse than when we came here, so that might be an issue. In addition to the threat of M23, the Congolese military and residents of eastern DRC continue to contend with increasing attacks by the Islamic State-affiliated Allied Democratic Forces and other groups, right? So in the midst of all this, and again, this is what we see with the destabilization of the Middle East as well, when all these forces come together and all this war happens, that causes these, what they call extremist groups of people banding together and saying, we're not taking this anymore, we have to stand up and be a militia. When the land is not regulated fully to include an army for the people form their own army. And that's what we've seen here with the Hutu extremists, with the M23, and with the ADF as well, all right? It said, and other groups. These are just those three were just the most prominent ones in all this, all right? DRC's relations with its other neighbors remain unchanged, remain charged, which, yeah, that's unchanged, including those of Burundi and Uganda. See, they still don't like each other. Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi are all more willing to work with each other than they are to work with the Congo, all right, or to work with the DRC. I keep saying that because the name Congo is in it, but on the other side of the river, it's called the Congo. This is the DRC. The other side of the river is the Congo. All right? DRC is home to nearly 7 million people who have been internally displaced due to the threat of violence and atrocities, extreme poverty, and mining expansion. So it's not just the violence and the war. It's also the fact that the people don't have any money because the government is corrupt. And it's also the mining that's going on in the country. Like, you trying to live, and here they are in your backyard digging up, the dirt, digging up all the useful minerals that they want. Meanwhile, you don't have no place to live no more because they just took it over. All right? The displaced population is in urgent need of security support, medical aid, and other humanitarian aid. Approximately 1 million Congolese nationals are seeking refuge beyond the Congo's borders, right? Approximately 1 million people are trying to leave, but they can't go nowhere. DRC is holding national elections on the 20th, was that 12 days? In the 3 months leading up to the election, candidates have been attacked by the president and even jailed, right? This, Shisekedi? I think Shisekedi. I can't never get that man's name right. And the political opposition is split between 24 candidates. So it's probably going to be a rigged election to keep Shisekedi in there, but it's still split amongst 24 other people. International monitoring groups have raised alarms about the corrupt practices of the Congo's Electoral Commission and the potential for political violence in and beyond Kinshasa, which would compound the conflict in the eastern provinces and further increase displacement just as foreign troops withdraw from the DRC. Right? So they're saying it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. All right. I just real quick, I want to read just a couple things in this article right here about how killings and rapes are going on in the Congo by the M23 rebels. All right. So let's skip down to something I was reading earlier. Yeah, I'm gonna jump down to right here when it says from March. Let me go back on this because it looks better now if I put it over here. There we go, that's a little better. Alright. From March to May 2023, Human Rights Watch interviewed in person and by phone 81 Congolese victims of abuses, family members, witnesses, local authorities, representatives of Congolese and international non-governmental organizations, UN officials, and foreign diplomats, right? So this Human Rights Watch, they, like I said, they put boots on the ground over there. They went over there and they were interviewing people, trying to see what was actually going on. Human Rights Watch also verified using satellite imagery, photos, and videos the shelling and destruction of civilian infrastructure. Most of the abuses documented took place between November of last year and March of this year, right? So was that a 5-month period? November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, that 5-month period. Human Rights Watch documented 8 unlawful killings and 14 cases of rape by M23 fighters. Human Rights Watch also received credible reports of over a dozen other summary killings by M23 forces, but because of access and security restraints, could not independently corroborate them. Right, so that's what they know about while they were looking. It was 8 unlawful killings and 14 cases of rape. All right, they're just running around. Them M23, they're just running around raping everybody. They're just running around killing everybody because they don't care. All right. In addition, 7 people were killed and 3 injured in apparently indiscriminate shelling on populated areas in Kanambe, Kichanga, near Mushaki during the M23 attacks, right? Yeah, this is brutal. It says survivors reported cases of M23 fighters raping women in front of their children and husbands, which adds to the trauma experienced by victims and erodes the social fabric of communities and families. Yeah, they're destroying the family, all right? Gang rapes were reported involving up to 5 assailants. Due to stigma and underreporting by survivors, the full number of incidents of sexual violence by armed groups is most likely much higher. I don't even know how somebody does this, right? And I'm not going to act like it's unique to these M23, because it's not. Like, this is what the U.S. was doing over there in Iraq too. It's the same thing, you know, the same thing they were doing in Afghanistan, all that kind of stuff. What wicked militia groups, wicked armies, this is the type of stuff they do. They, I don't know. That's just a type of evil that I just don't understand. And this is the paragraph that I wanted to get to because it's so revealing. A 46-year-old mother of 6 who fled Mushaki in Masisi territory on February 25th with her 75-year-old mother. So there's a 46-year-old mother of 6 with her 75-year-old mother, right? The grandmother of these 6 kids. Ran into a group of 10 M23 rebels who took their money. They wanted to rape us, she said. My mother said no, so they shot a bullet into her chest and she died on the spot. The 75-year-old woman. They're like, let me rape you. And she's like, no. So they killed her. Then 4 of them raped me. As they were raping me, one said, we've come from Rwanda to destroy you. All right? So this is the mind of the Watusis. I'm not necessarily saying this is the mind of every Rwandan, but this is the mind of the Watusi, the M23. All right? And we didn't read nothing about how the M23 were attacking the Watusi back in Rwanda. We didn't read nothing like that. We read that they were coming into the Congo to kill the Hutu. All right? They said, we come from Rwanda to destroy you. All right? And I have this other article pulled up right here, mainly just to show how this is the UN, and they mainly made this article for their own damage control, for their own PR. First of all, let's just look at the length of this article versus these. You see this one that we went into that tries to explain it is the Council of Foreign Relations. I'm not saying they're righteous, I'm just saying they were thorough. And even over here with the Human Rights Watch. You see how long this article is? Then you go over here to the UN article. It ends right there. You see that right there? So the UN mainly just put this out for some PR. They're saying, look, we recognize the Congo situation, and they describe it slightly and briefly. They said, oh, it's complex, and the decades of clashes between armed groups have caused unprecedented levels of protection needs, vulnerabilities, and the displacement of 6 million people within a country. All right, and forcing another million to seek asylum across Africa. It says, outside of the DRC, see, I read this sentence and I was like, oh, this is just for PR. Great. It says, outside of the DRC, the UNHCR, which is the Humanitarian Crisis of Refugees, I believe. I don't know. It's something about that. It's something about, refugees. Outside of the DRC, the UNHCR will continue to promote resettlement opportunities and complementary pathways for refugees and will support the voluntary repatriation of families in Angola, the Republic of Congo, and Zambia if conditions allow for safe and dignified return. So I read that right there and I was like, oh yeah, the UN just wanted a press release, they wanted some PR, so they put this article out. But they don't care about the people. They don't care about the people at all. That's why they pulled out. That's why they pulled out of the country. We read about how UNESCO pulled out of the country. Even the US said, hey, that was not a good move. All right. So, I know I got this pulled up right here in 1 Kings 5, but what I really want to get to, or what I want to start with, I should say, what I want to start with, now I know we've done a lot of reading, I'll try to wrap it up, but what I want to start with is Deuteronomy, I believe it's Deuteronomy 7, what I'm looking for, towards the end. All right. Not quite. Give me one moment. This is good, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for. Not exactly what I'm looking for. Like I said, give me a moment. Give me a moment, please. There's something, and it might even be in the Exodus, about how the Lord was bringing us into the land of Israel for a specific reason. All right? Let's see what we got here. And this is, that's not it. This is a new Bible that we use for, essentially for, not exactly decoration, but, we can actually start with Exodus 11 and 7. Let's start with Exodus 11 and 7. I'll look for this in Deuteronomy. Exodus 11, and we're going to read verse 7. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that you may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. I wanted to point that out because the origin of the Israelites is an exodus from Africa. That is the origin of the nation of Israel. That is our origin story. All right? So keep that in mind, that our whole origin story has to do, or rather a connection and disconnection from the Hamites, from the Africans. All right? So it's no surprise that when you go to Zephaniah 3, verse 8, it's probably not 8, is it? No, it's 10. That's what I'm looking for. Zephaniah 3 and verse 10, it says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. So God said he has people, he has dispersed his people beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, right? So let's look at this African map again. Here you see the rivers of Ethiopia are the Nile, right? And he said rivers, so that includes this river too. So the Nile goes all the way down here, right? So he said beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And again, these borders that are drawn today were not around in biblical times. Ethiopia is the whole horn, all right? It's where you see Ethiopia, but it's also where you see South Sudan, it's where you see Kenya, it's where you see Somalia. All of this is Ethiopia, right? It's all Kush. But he said beyond all this, beyond the horn. So where does that take you? Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia takes you to Central, West, and South Africa, all right? He said, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia I will call my suppliants. And right beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is the DRC. All right? And even Uganda and Rwanda and Tanzania and them. So, from there, I can't find that what I was looking for in Deuteronomy. Perhaps I will find it at another time. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I'll look for it at another time. But let's keep going. That's the beyond the rivers of Ethiopia I call my suppliants. I want to point this out real quick of how the Israelites and the Canaanites got into those areas of Africa, right? And that's why I have this book here, From Babylon to Timbuktu by Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor. I believe it's Dr. Windsor. We don't have doctor on here, so it's just Rudolph R. Windsor. But From Babylon to Timbuktu is a good history book. The subtitle is A History of Ancient Black Races, including the Black Hebrews. So I will be frank. Rudolph R. Windsor was amongst the commandment keepers in New York, I believe. If you know the history of the commandment keepers, you know where they came from. And they commandment keepers themselves, I don't know if Rudolph is this way, but the commandment keepers themselves rejected Christ, and therefore they rejected Bivens when he brought them the truth about Christ. But the point that I wanted to make with this is there's a lot of good information in this book. This is a good information in this book, From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph R. Windsor. A lot of good information about ancient peoples, all right? Specifically, ancient black races, right? So the thing about this book is it comes from the perspective of Hamites, essentially. That's the way that Windsor writes this, all right? So we'll get into this, but we'll also keep jumping back and forth in the scriptures, all right? So the first thing I want to read out of here is on page 107. On page 107, it says the third paragraph. It says, we should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. Okay, so what is he talking about here? Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. All right? This is in 1 Kings 5, starting with verse 1. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father. For Hiram was ever a lover of David, right? David's reputation went throughout all the world, and Hiram was like, oh, this sounds like a badass. I like David. So he met with David, he liked David, and since Solomon is the son of David, he's sending him word, right? And Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, thou knowest how that David my father could not build a house unto the name of the Lord his God for the wars which were about him on every side, right? He was too busy, right? And God told him his hands was too bloody, until the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God hath given me rest on every side, so that there is neither adversary nor evil occurrent. And behold, I purpose to build a house unto the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord spake unto David my father, saying, thy son, whom I will set upon thy throne in thy room, he shall build a house unto my name. Now therefore, command thou that they hew me cedar trees out of Lebanon, and my servants shall be with thy servants. So Solomon said, my Israelite servants are going to join together with your Canaanite servants, all right? And unto thee will I give hire for thy servants according to all that thou shalt appoint. He said, and look, I'll hire them to do whatever you tell them to do. For thou knowest that there is not among us any that can skill to hew timber like unto the Sidonians. He said, look, you Canaanites are very industrious when it comes to chopping down the trees and shipping lumber. You're very industrious, all right? Verse 7. And it came to pass when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly, and said, Blessed be the Lord this day, which hath given unto David a wise son over this great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the things which thou sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar and concerning timber of fir. He said, okay, I like what you said, and I'm gonna give you this wood that you're talking about. My servant shall bring them down from Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey them by sea in floats into the place that thou shalt appoint me, and will cause them to be discharged there, and thou shalt receive them, and thou shalt accomplish my desire in giving food for my household. He said, look, okay, I'll give you the trees if you give me some food, if you give me some wheat, things like that. So Hiram gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire, and Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 measures of wheat for food to his household, and 20 measures of pure oil, right, cooking oil. Thus gave Solomon to Hiram year by year. So they had this agreement going, right? And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he promised him. And there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they too made a league together, right? So this Canaanite king and this Israelite king made a league together. This was about 1,000 years BC, right? This is probably in the 900s BC, but in the later 900s, like maybe like 980, maybe 960, right? So I wanted to get to the point that these Canaanites and these Israelites made a league together, right? And that's why we read that here in from Babylon to Timbuktu, page 107, where it says, we should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. That's what you're going to learn, that these Canaanites are the same as the Phoenicians. And I actually just uploaded this past week on the YouTube page, and I streamed it maybe a few months back on the Facebook page, the Israelite-Phoenician connection. All right, for more detail on that, watch that video. All right, I'm gonna jump around in this book a little bit. All right, just to get to the points that we want. All right, so this is page 27. It says the Canaanites were the primordial aborigines of the land of Canaan. We may call them Africans because of their blood relationship to the other inhabitants of the African continents. And I'm going to jump over to page 28 real quick to expound on that a little further. It says, the Canaanites were blood brothers of the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Nubians, Sudanese, and other Africans. All right, so these Canaanites were Africans, all right, but they were not in Africa at the time. All right, so it says there were 11 Canaanite tribes living in the land of Canaan and surrounding it before the black Israelites possessed it. I'm going to jump around a little bit. It just explains that the Sidonians and the Tyrians were the same Canaanites, and the Greeks called them Phoenicians. All right. Phoenician, it's disputed of what the name actually means. In this book it says land of palm, but other sources will tell you it's named after the dye called Tyrian purple. So I'm going to jump around a little bit on this, all right? So the Canaanites and the Hebrews spoke the same language. They spoke the language of Hebrew, all right? So to prove that real quick, I'm going to jump back to page 108, actually, where it says, it starts on 107 and then 108. It says, at the ruins of Carthage, all right, Carthage being modern-day Tunisia, at the ruins of Carthage, archaeologists have found about 4,000 inscriptions in the ancient language of Canaan, all right? So, as I mentioned, Windsor writes this from a Hamite perspective. He writes this from an African first perspective. But of course, we being Israelites, we always go Israelite first and nothing else. That's why whenever I was reading the information on the Congo, I'm not like, oh, these poor Africans. I'm trying to figure out who the Israelites are, because there are Israelites in Africa, and we're getting to that. But I do want to point out Tunisia. As you see, Tunis, Up here, that's Carthage. All right. And Carthage actually ruled from like Morocco to Libya. But anyway, let's get back at it. What did I just read? Oh, the language of Canaan. Nahum Schlouts says these inscriptions date from the time of Nehemiah, of Simon the Just, of Hannibal, and of Hasdrubal. Right? So he said they go back as far as Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, these inscriptions that he found in Carthage. And Nehemiah was around 400 years before Christ, maybe 300 and something. All right. And most of all, we have found again the ancient language and writing of Canaan, the rich idiomatic speech of a city which once counted 700,000 inhabitants. Right. So that's big for an ancient city. And we Hebrew writers, we who write and feel in our biblical tongue, have recognized at once that this recalled Phoenician language is nothing more nor less than Hebrew, a pure Hebrew dialect, nearly the same as was spoken in the country of Israel. So the language of the Canaanites and the language of the Israelites was the same. It was Hebrew. All right? It's the same thing that Noah was speaking when he stepped off the boat. The Canaanites held on to that. That's could be one of the reasons why the Lord told Abraham to go to the land of Canaan, because they spoke the same language. All right. So from there, I'm going to jump back just because it makes the most sense jumping back and forth like this. Because again, the way that Windsor frames this, it kind of just like builds to the points that I have jumped to already of the connection between the Israelites and the Phoenicians. So he'll write it as if, oh, this is specifically about the Canaanites and it's not about anybody else, and then boom, he'll drop a line like, we need to remember that Solomon and Hiram had this league together. We need to remember that, Hebrew and the language of Canaan is the same language. All right. Anyway, I'm jumping back to page 27 in the last paragraph. It says, these black people, these Canaanites, were proficient in philosophy, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, and navigation. They had good harbors, which enabled them to navigate to distant lands, such as Cyprus, Sardinia, Crete, Rhodes, Cadiz, and Spain. So all these are Mediterranean places. Sicily, again around Italy. Carthage in North Africa near Tunis. Tangier, which is also in the same region. Ophir, which I believe he is confused here and doesn't know where Ophir is. Ophir is India. And the Canary Isles. So the Canary Isles are right there to the west of the West African coast. So he's letting you know that the Canaanites had plenty of settlements in not only Europe and the Mediterranean, but in Africa as well. All right. So it's well known that these Canaanites had settlements in Africa. All right. So I'm gonna jump down to the next page. In the next page, it says the Phoenicians established a colony in North Africa called Carthage, and they, the Carthaginians, always considered themselves Canaanites. All right. So the Canaanites founded Carthage, all right? But we're going to read into that a little bit more here in a second, all right? I'm going to read the next paragraph. It said, when Moses led the black Israelites out of Egypt, Northeast Africa, Moses died in the wilderness, right? In the wilderness of Sinai before he could get to the land. And actually he died in Moab, in that mountain in Moab. Anyway. Then Joshua led the Israelites into the land of Canaan and dispossessed the Canaanites. Now, it is written in a Jewish book called the Babylonian Talmud, and I don't endorse the Talmud at all, but Windsor is using it as a historical reference here, so we'll bear with him for a little bit. For when the Africans came to plead against the Jews before Alexander the Macedon, they said, Canaan belongs to us, as it is written, the land of Canaan with the coast thereof, and Canaan was the ancestor of these people. Right, so the Africans came to Alexander the Greek saying, look, please give us our land in Canaan back, get them Jews out, because we want the land of Canaan back. I'm going to read the next paragraph. These Canaanites or Africans were driven out of the land of Canaan by Joshua about 332 BC. Oh no, excuse me. That's it says about 332 BC, Alexander conquered Palestine. As stated above, the Africans came to Alexander claiming that the land of Canaan belonged to them. The point that I want to elucidate is that these Canaanites considered themselves Africans. You see it right there? They considered themselves Africans because they were quite literally the brothers of the ethnic Africans. All right. All right. So from there, let's jump to talk about Carthage just real quick and the origin of Carthage. The origin of Carthage. Let's get that real quick. On page 106, I believe it starts. Yes. Let's see. Do I want to jump? Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll start right here at the top of this paragraph. On page 106, the one under the Canaanites and Phoenicians in Africa. It says, the language which is called Hebrew Phoenician or Canaanite was employed in the lands called Phoenicia, Palestine, or Canaan, whichever you want to call it, for over 1,000 years before the Aramaeans, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, came to Canaan. Now, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were not Aramaeans, all right? They were Hebrews from or at least that's where Abraham came from. But the point is that these Canaanites were already established before Abraham got there, right? So that would have been, they would have been established before 2200 BC. All right. So let's keep reading. The Israelites lost their Aramaic language and adopted the Hebrew speech of the Canaanites. That's a lie. The Hebrews spoke Hebrew, clearly, and the Canaanites spoke Hebrew as well, because they were speaking the same language as Noah when he stepped off the boat. The Hebrew Phoenician merchants from the cities of Sidon and Tyre controlled the trade along the Mediterranean coast for more than 1,000 years before there were any economic treaties made with the Israelites, right? Before even Abraham got there, they were established already. All right. It says the Hebrew-speaking Phoenicians, Canaanites, established their greatest city, Carthage, at Tunis in North Africa. All the Canaanites were black people, and as we see, and when you read the scripture, you see that they are Hamites, so that makes sense. All right. It says before the Phoenicians established their colony, Carthage, in Africa, many Hebrew-speaking Canaanites had migrated across northern Africa. All right. So I'm going to keep reading on this. It says, one Tosefta, quoting an older source, says that when Joshua approached Canaan, he told the inhabitants that 3 courses were open to them. They could either leave the country, or they could sue for peace, or they could declare war against them. The Girgashites, among others, preferred to withdraw into Africa. So some sources, and I say some sources because it's not in the Bible. The Bible does not record all the goings of the Canaanites. It records the goings of the Israelites. But some sources say that some Canaanites, whenever Joshua came to take the land, they fled into Africa. So what am I showing here? What am I trying to prove? That the first inhabitants of Africa were Canaanites and Israelites, or at least the areas that I'm talking about. The first inhabitants of West, Central, and South Africa were Canaanites and Israelites. And you still have those people there today. Canaanites and Israelites fighting each other. All right? That's what's going on in the Congo. All right? It says, Girgashites. The Tosefta goes on to say that the Amorites, the Cadmonite, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, some of whom figure among the founders of Carthage, also went to Africa. These traditions date from a period when communication between Africa and Phoenicia was continuous, right? And we see that. Now, when it comes to the ships of Tarshish, which chapter is that? Is that going to be chapter 9? Talks about the ships of Tarshish. Not seeing it. Servants of Solomon. Going to Ophir. No, this isn't what I'm looking for. Yeah, please bear with me. I don't think it's going to be chapter 8, but I guess it could be. No, it's not chapter 8, because I remember 1 Kings 8. 10 bases. Okay, so yeah, this is the finishing of the temple. Yeah, maybe I just looked over in chapter 9. I'm not sure. Yeah, because that's where I just was. So maybe I'll find it. But anyway, the point is that these Canaanites went to Africa. All right. So I'm gonna keep reading on the next page, 107. I'm going to read the same thing that I read a while ago, where it says, "We should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians established their metropolis, Carthage, in the 9th century BC. The 9th century BC is the 800s BC. So this is 100 years after Solomon had established that treaty. All right? So it's not crazy to believe that it was actually Israelites in the founding of Carthage. All right, and we're going to read that a little later down as well. In the 9th century BC, eventually they conquered the neighboring tribes from Libya to the Atlantic Ocean, disseminating their Hebrew Phoenician language and culture in every direction. All right, the Hebrew Phoenician language, and again, he's doing this from an African perspective. He's doing this from a Hamite perspective. That's why he's saying Hebrew Phoenician as opposed to just Hebrew. That's what it is. It's Hebrew language. The Hebrew language and culture were invigorated and strengthened by the deportation and migration of energetic black Hebrews from Palestine. Ptolemy Soter of Egypt conquered Syria and Phoenicia, deporting more than 100,000 Hebrews. The Persian king Cambyses had previously sanctioned the colonization of Hebrews in Egypt. During the wars of the Maccabees, thousands of Hebrews became slaves and exiles. Ptolemy Lathyrus captured 10,000 slaves from the region of the Sea of Galilee. The kings of Egypt, Psamtik I and Psamtik II, used Israelite garrisons on the Egyptian borders near Libya. The wars with Rome compelled hundreds of thousands more to escape into North Africa. All right, it says, during the Punic Wars and after, North Africa contained a large Hebrew population. This Hebrew population made converts and intermarried with the Canaanites and native Africans. Excuse me. But the point that I want to get to, and I've already read the next, I've already read the next paragraph, which is talking about how the Phoenician language and the Hebrew are the same language. Nahum Schlaus said, "Look, I found these writings. It's just Hebrew. I found these Carthaginian writings. I found these Canaanite writings. It's just Hebrew. All right." The population of Carthage was derived from Palestine. This is on page 108, by the way. Second paragraph. And its civilization was Hebraic in origin. So Carthage, a city in North Africa, was established by Hebrews. All right. It says, Schlaus is certain, after much research, that the language Hannibal spoke and in which he directed his troops was Hebrew. All right, I'm going to read the next couple paragraphs, and then we'll get back to the scriptures. There is evidence that the Carthaginians possessed a high priesthood, and their ceremonies and sacrifices were similar to the rituals found in the book of Leviticus. According to some inscriptions, the Hebrew tribes of Asher and Zebulun were in Carthage from the foundation of the city. All right? So, not only can you say that, Israelites eventually made it to Carthage, but Asher and Zebulun were there from the beginning. All right? And not only do we have this league that Solomon made with the Phoenicians in righteousness, but there's also a league that was made with the Phoenicians in wickedness under the northern kingdom king Ahab. His wife Jezebel was a Canaanite, a Phoenician, who done wickedness to the children of Israel. All right? All sorts of wickedness to the children of Israel. So this is nothing new. The Canaanites committing war crimes against the Israelites is nothing new. It's been happening. All right? It says, from the beginning, from the foundation of the city, excuse me. At the ruins of Carthage were excavated many inscriptions containing many Hebrew names, such as Joab, Joas, and Joel. The city of Tunis is said to be neither Arab nor European. That tells you right there that the Jews are neither Arab nor European. It says Tunis is a Jewish city. Nowhere else does the Jew feel at home as he does in Tunis. Schlaus says so beautifully. And indeed, Tunis, the inheritor of Hebrew Carthage, is the eternal city of the Jews. For like the phoenix, the Jews have risen again and again out of the ashes of their destruction. After the sacking of Carthage, the Jews were found again in Carthage. After the sacking of Carthage, the Jews were found again in Carthage under Roman domination. After the Byzantine persecutions, they fled into the desert. And even under the persecution of the Arabs, the Jews somehow managed to survive catastrophe after catastrophe. So we see how this African city was sacked by Arabs and Romans and all sorts of people. And in other areas of North Africa being persecuted caused the Israelites and Canaanites who were in these regions to flee further south. All right? And you can't go no more south than South Africa, right? So that's one of the ways that these places were populated, all right? So I do want to touch on this before we get back to the scripture, because this says the same thing as the scripture say. And on page 84, I'm going to start with I'm going to start with the second paragraph. This is from Babylon 2, page 84. In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state. All right? With great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. Right? We read about that in Christ's time, right? They wanted to kill him. And Herod just killed all the babies, right? Killed all the 2 and under. All right? During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, right? So this is explaining how Israelites got in Africa, all right? Fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves, all right? So from there, we're going to put this down a little bit. We're going to get into the good book, all right? So I do want to find out where the ships of Tarshish scripture was at. It might be in the Chronicles, but I thought it was one of the Kings too. I thought it was one of the Kings in chapter 9. Maybe I just looked over it. Maybe it was maybe it's somewhere else. But I wanted to read that about Rome capturing Jerusalem and sending, a million Jews into Africa through that time period, because Christ said the same thing. There's the reason why all the Jews fled into Africa instead of staying in the land or trying to fight or running somewhere else is because Christ told them to. And I've read this before over the past few weeks about the times of the Gentiles, but I'll read it again here. This is Luke 21, I'm sorry, verse 20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, that's the armies of Rome, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh, it's near. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. When he says flee to the mountains, the closest mountains are Sinai, first of all, and Sinai leads you into the mountains that are on the Egyptian east coast along the Red Sea. All right? Those mountains that lead you down from Egypt into Ethiopia, right? As God said in Zephaniah 3 and 11, beyond those rivers of Ethiopia is where he's going to call his dispersed from. So that would mean Central, West, and South Africa. Flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereunto. He said, don't come back to Jerusalem, because the heathen are taking it. All right? So, let's look up Tarshish. It's 2 Chronicles. I guess it was 2 Chronicles and not the Kings. That's why I didn't find it. 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 9. thought there was a 9 in there somewhere. Excuse me. Second Chronicles 9. Yeah. Under Solomon's wealth and splendor. Alright. Seat of ivory, all the drinking vessels were of gold, no more silver. Verse 21. It says, for the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Hiram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Okay, so it says ships of Tarshish. Tarshish is Spain, all right? Spain is, you see how close Spain is to Africa right here? You have the Straits of Gibraltar right here, what some people call the Pillars of Hercules at some point. But the Straits of Gibraltar right here is Spain. You can basically jump from Spain to Morocco, right? So when it says ships of Tarshish, this is just where like a base was in Tarshish. But look at what was brought. Look at what was brought. It says bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. I don't think any of these things are from Spain. Perhaps maybe, but certainly not ivory, and certainly not apes. Apes and ivory come from Africa. That lets you know that these Tarshish ships went all around the Mediterranean. It was 3 years. They would come once every 3 years, as we just read. It said every 3 years, right? So they were taking their time, right? So they probably docked here for like a month or two, and then went all around to West Africa, right? It's not crazy to make that assumption, all right? And I've been mentioning the Canaanites and West Africa and all West Central and South Africa. Well, how did they get there? Where do you find that at, right? So who were the first people to circumnavigate Africa? Go all the way around it. Who were the first people to do that? Who was the first to circumnavigate Africa? And you see it right here. It says the first alleged, of course, Esau don't want to give no credit to anybody who's not them. So he said the first alleged circumnavigation of the African continent attested to was made by Phoenician sailors. Phoenician sailors. And when did this happen? In an expedition commissioned by Egyptian Pharaoh Necho II, around 600 BC. Right? So this would have been after the league between Solomon and Hiram. This would have been 400 years after that league. Right? So the Israelites and the Phoenicians were already intertwined by that time. All right? Perhaps they still had some sort of, racial identity, but they were working together, is my point. All right? So, whether you want to say it was through the league that Solomon made with Hiram, or whether you want to say it's the league that Ahab made with Jezebel and her family, regardless, there was a league made between the Phoenicians, or rather the Canaanites and the Israelites, and those two together became what was known as the Phoenicians. All right? So it says the first alleged circumnavigation of the African continent attested to was made by Phoenician sailors. In an expedition commissioned by Egyptian Pharaoh Necho II around 600 BC, which took 3 years. A report of this expedition is provided by Herodotus. So Herodotus is Edomite Greek who wrote history as well, right? And they love to reference Herodotus all the time. So while they're saying alleged when it comes to a Herodotus story is beyond me. But because they usually they usually love some Herodotus. But anyway, so you gotta think this took 3 years. This isn't one boat ride where they never stop. All right. So this circumnavigation, it was commissioned by the Egyptian pharaoh, right? So probably started in Egypt at the exit of the Nile. So you're talking about 3 years. So you sailed to Carthage, which was already established at this time. You sailed to Carthage, you stayed there for a little bit. You sailed to Tarshish, Spain, you stay there for a little bit, and then you keep going to like the Canary Isles, you keep going around to like, Guinea and Senegal, you keep going around to the Congo region, right? You keep going to South Africa, you go around to the Madagascar, Mozambique region, and then you come back up through the Red Sea into Egypt. That's how the trip took place. And it wouldn't be unlike ancient sailors to set up a city somewhere, to set up a post, to set up a port, to stay in a region once they sailed there and say, no, I'll catch you on the flip side. I want to stay here now. I want to start my new life here now. That's not unlike ancient sailors to do that. All right? So here we have actual historical records stating that the Canaanites, or rather the Phoenicians, put big air quotes so you know the Phoenician means Israelite and Canaanite. All right? So the Phoenicians actually went all the way around Africa. All right? So in these places where there wasn't people already, that's where the Israelites and Canaanites set up shop, because there were already people in Ethiopia. Those are the Cushites. There were already people in Libya. That's the Foot-ites. And then you have obviously the Egyptians, Mizraimites. But in all these other regions, like in West, Central, and South Africa, you have your Israelites and Canaanites there. And that's what's going on in the Congo. All right? So what's the solution? What's the solution? Let's go back to Zephaniah. Zephaniah must have been Judah, because he talked about not only did he talk about the Jews in Africa, but he also said this right here, all right, as a solution. He said, this is Zephaniah 2 verse 1, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired, right? So here you have, we read about the Hutus. The Hutus were divided. Back at the Rwandan genocide, the Hutus were divided. The Hutus, some of them were extremists who wanted to kill the Watutsis. The other ones didn't want to, right? So then more Hutus ended up being killed by the Hutus. So God said, gather together. Stop being divided. None of this conflict would have happened if these two things were, this first thing was followed, and I'm going to explain something else afterwards, all right? Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired, before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as a chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you, before you are judged for your sins, gather yourselves together, all right? Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be you shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. All right, so not only gather together, but gather together in righteousness and meekness. All right, so it's not the Hutu need to gather together so they can exterminate the Watus. No, all right. This is the other part of this that I need to bring out on this. In Romans 12 and verse 18, I believe it's 18. Is it 18? Yes. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. So it's not about the Hutus coming together so they can exterminate the Watus. No. Come together and live in righteousness and live peaceably. Right? That's the answer to any conflict, to any war, is coming together in righteousness and meekness and living peaceably with all men, as the scriptures say to do. Now, does this mean that, we're all supposed to be singing Kumbaya around the campfire and all intermarrying in the No. No. Keep the laws of God. All right? Keep the laws of God and live at peace. You can do both of those things. You can live peaceably with people, but then also understand who is God going to judge and why. All right? So, with that, I was trying to think if there's anything else I want to touch on as far as like Canaanites and Israelites. Go check out the Israelite Phoenician connection. It's a video I put up that shows this in a little bit more detail, I guess. Most of the same resources, though, I will say. But with that, I know we're running a little long tonight. This is a lot as far as the conflict since '94. There's a lot to cover. So, hope y'all learned something. With that, I say shalom. Most High in Christ bless. Happy Sabbath.